Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Our first story about why you shouldn't take credit for other people starting your own project. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. Good luck with your new business. For a while, I worked as a web designer in a small ad agency serving a very niche industry. Previously, the design team had no creative lead, and we're all sort of operating independently across varying clients. We decided to hire a creative director to fill that gap, and I was given the task of sorting through and giving first-round interviews to find the person who would later become my supervisor. Two candidates in particular stood out from the rest for very different reasons. One was exceptionally talented, an all-around nice guy, and somebody who generally would have been great for the role. The other, let's call him John, had mediocre talent, came across as an insufferable arrogant P, but had previous experience working in the niche industry that we serviced. He also had contacts within that industry that could lead to new business. Despite my strong recommendation to not hire John, his relationships in the industry were too compelling to our agency's leadership to pass up, and they hired him. It didn't take long before the entire company started to realize John was a huge burden. He had virtually zero experience in anything related to digital design for apps, websites, mobile, etc. were all completely and utterly beyond his grasp, but he used his position of relative power to make decisions on those projects that the entire design team refused to support, most of which came back to bite the company in the butt later. The design team hated him because fixing and working around his screw-ups became part of our daily routine. The sales team hated him because he'd claimed it took him unbelievably exaggerated amounts of time to complete even the most trivial of tasks. Example, 4 days to design a business card template. So they wouldn't even assign him projects anymore. Work that was clearly his responsibility started to rapidly trickle down to the rest of the design team. We'd be working late nights 4 out of 5 days a week because all of his projects that were in danger of missing deadlines would be reassigned to us. Meanwhile, he'd be the first to walk out the door every day right at 5 p.m. without fail. On top of that, the guy was absolutely, without a doubt, the biggest tool I've ever met, always right about everything, completely unbending on his idiotic opinions, and completely clueless that literally every person in the building wished he would get hit by a truck. I genuinely tried to work with him for about a year until I decided that the job had become intolerable because of him and wasn't going to change anytime soon, so I turned in my 2-week notice. About a month after I left, I heard that he'd been let go from the job. Shortly after that, I noticed that he changed his LinkedIn status to show he was working for a new agency I'd never heard of, also servicing that same niche industry. I looked him up and quickly figured out that he had started his own agency, a primarily digital agency, when he had no experience in digital or interactive design and had literally effed up every digital/interactive project he'd ever been on. I know, because most of them were reassigned to me when he proved incapable of doing them himself. I looked at the portfolio on his website and found literally project after project of my work. He was using my work from the ad agency as examples of the work his agency could produce. I briefly considered contacting him and requesting he remove my work from his portfolio for ethical reasons, but I could already hear his reply in my head: "As creative lead, all work done by my team is an extension of my creative direction." He'd used similar lines in the past to insert himself into receiving credit on successful projects he'd had zero involvement in. So instead, I sent an email to one of the partners of the agency we both had worked for, saying something along the lines of, "Hey, not sure if you noticed this, but it looks like John is using your company's intellectual property to directly compete against you. If I had to guess, I'd assume his next step would be to make a move at your client list." The reply was short and sweet: "Thanks for bringing this to my attention. He'll be hearing from our attorney in the morning." John's website was brought down less than 24 hours later. And our second story: when the system works in your favor. So a few years ago, I worked as a valet for one of the biggest hotel chains in the world. It was the best job I ever had in regards to the pay. I took home thousands of dollars a month. It may not sound like a lot, but I was 20, so it was a big deal for me. I'd started in the summer. Come winter of the same year, it's 2 days before Christmas and relatively slow. There's me and one other person working the front drive. I tell him I want to go home early, so he goes for his break. Out of nowhere, a truck comes speeding around the corner and pulls into the driveway and stops in a way that would impede traffic. I take a gander but decide not to approach as they don't appear to need any help and they didn't bother rolling down the windows or exiting the car. A few minutes go by and a car pulls up behind the truck. I approach the car, offer the driver assistance, and provide directions to the garage. However, the truck has not moved, so I approach to ask them to pull to the side. When I approach, the driver does not roll down the window, so I tap on it. The windows are tinted incredibly darkly. I'm greeted by a mumbled voice, so I ask if they can roll the window down so I can hear better. Down comes the window, and I'm greeted by this troll doll of a woman. "What TF do you want? Don't touch my effing car." Shocked, I politely ask her to pull forward. She rolls the window back up and stays in place. I tap the window again, but now she's getting out of the car. She puts her chest to mine, or to my abdomen at least, I'm almost a foot taller than her, and proceeds to try to push me back, all while screaming profanities in my face and making threats. I'm remaining calm, not letting her get to me, all while asking her to get away from me and leave me alone. She continues trying to back me down, constantly being in contact with my person. After a few moments, I extend my arms to create space between us, and she attacks. Now, I know how this might sound to those of you that are skeptical. I assure you, it was the gentlest extension of my arms I could muster. I made sure I didn't shove her or push her down in any way. She returned swinging at my face, scratching and punching me. She'd knocked my glasses from my face, threw stomach punched, and at one point even grabbed my D like she wanted to take it with her. Now I'm upset. Still doing my best to keep cool, I defend myself and put her in a front-facing headlock and restrain her until help arrives. In the mix of the whole incident, her daughter attacked me from the back with punches and an attempted headlock, but I proved to be too resilient. Told my job I was going home for the day, went to press charges and to seek medical attention. Returned to work the next day to be suspended pending an investigation, all while being assured by the manager, "Yeah, man, don't even worry about it. It's just corporate's dumb rules." Mind you, the entire incident was filmed by the hotel's security cameras, so I had no reason to lie or feel like my job was in any danger. Subsequently, got fired for said incident and had assault charges brought against me from my assailants. We go to court. These bees don't even have lawyers, sitting in the courtroom laughing and making snide remarks. My defense lawyer had subpoenaed the tapes and brought them in as evidence, which had the charges against me immediately dropped. But that's not all. Now the DA had picked up assault charges against the two of them. They're offered a PBJ, probation before judgment, and turn it down in favor of a jury trial, all the while still coming to court laughing and giggling, being represented by a public defender. Case goes to trial, jurors are shown the video, which completely backs my story and destroys theirs. This bee is still lying, insinuating I just walked up to her and assaulted her and her daughter. Come to find out, this is her 4th time being tried for assault, and she's never been to jail. She gets convicted of second-degree assault, and I'm invited to give testimony at her sentencing trial. I have no criminal record, had a full-time job, am a full-time student, and had a beautiful baby girl less than a week after being suspended and fired from my job. B got 2 years, and they cuffed her in court. When the realization that crap just got real for her hit, she begins to cry and sob and look around as if looking for help. It was at this time that her and I had locked eyes across the courtroom. I proceeded to stare this bee in the face and do a full-fledged victory dance in my seat as they carried her away. And our last story. The Iceman is dumbeth. I was working at a bar that had caught fire and burned to the ground. It was going to open in a few months at a new location, but my unemployment checks weren't big enough to keep me in rent payments and food, so I took a job at McDonald's to make ends meet. I was in my early 30s at the time. There was one kid, let's call him Mark, who thought he was the king of the kitchen. He was around 17, had worked there for about a year and a half, and was the cousin of Annie, the second shift manager. He thought he could get away with anything, and I guess he was right. One night, there was very little business, and the kitchen was at a standstill. Mark came over with a spray bottle and instructed me to go and water the plants in the seating area. I took the bottle and walked out from behind the counter to the plants, which I noticed from about 3 feet away were plastic. I headed outside and smoked a cigarette, fuming at the asinine behavior at this entitled little P. I walked back inside, washed my hands, got the ice bucket and a whisk. I walked over to Mark and said, "Annie said that the ice machine is broken, but that we need more ice. Take this bucket, fill it with water, take it to the walk-in cooler, stir it with the whisk until you get ice." Mark looked at me for a moment with a confused expression on his face, took the tools, and did as he was instructed. About an hour after he entered the walk-in, Annie came over and asked for volunteers to leave early because business was slow. "Where's Mark?" she asked, and when I answered her, she looked dumbfounded. "He's in the cooler, making ice." I smiled broadly at her as I said it. She stepped over to the walk-in and opened the door. Most of the kitchen crew followed her, and when the door was opened, they saw Mark, sitting on an overturned milk crate, carefully stirring the bucket of water with the whisk. He looked up and said, "I might have to go to the freezer. The cooler isn't cold enough to get the water to freeze." The explosion of laughter that followed was heartwarming. For weeks, people would put a whisk at Mark's workstation. The gag became a standard hazing practice for new people training in the kitchen. Mark eventually quit because he said he wasn't getting enough respect in the kitchen, but by that time, I was back to work at the bar. I had a new respect for people working fast food restaurants. They put up with a lot of crap behind the scenes, and I never complain about the time it takes to get an order up anymore. They do the best they can. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.